Since the dawn of recorded history, empires have risen and fallen in waves. They all shared the same ambition to expand, control, and endure. But what's fascinating is that no two empires ruled the same way. Some swept through history like a storm, fueled by brute force. Others operated like precise administrative machines. And some didn't need to conquer land, just minds. In this video, we'll explore every major empire model that once ruled the world, not by name, but by how they operated. The military conquest empire. There is a kind of empire that, just by hearing its name, you picture blood, fire, and thundering hooves across continents. No politics, no philosophy of governance, just raw power. For these empires, expansion wasn't a process, it was a hunger, and war was the only way to feed it. They didn't build empires slowly like farmers planting seeds. They moved like sandstorms, sweeping through and devouring all in their path. That's how the Mongols did it. From the cold steppes, they appeared out of nowhere. In just a few decades, they reached from China to Eastern Europe. No bureaucracy, no ideology, just one rule: submit and live. Resist, and your entire city burns. Similarly, thousands of years earlier, Assyria struck terror across the Middle East. They didn't just defeat enemies, they made brutality a system of governance. Towers of skulls, carvings of torture on palace walls, not for decoration but a warning. Don't rebel. But this kind of empire is like dry firewood. It blazes, then collapses. Once the terrifying king dies, once the army grows tired, the conquered lands have no reason to stay loyal. No guiding philosophy to hold it together. No legal system to stabilize it. No memory left except terror. And so military conquest empires often end the way they began: war and ruin. The centralized administrative empire after the storms of war. Some empires chose a different path, to build from the ground up. They didn't just want to conquer, they wanted to control, organize, and sustain their rule for generations. And to do that, they needed something military empires lacked: a system. Rome was the master of this model. When they conquered new territory, they didn't just build military outposts, they built roads, they brought in laws, they gave locals the chance to become Roman citizens. They understood that if an empire is to last centuries, the conquered must feel that living under the empire isn't such a bad deal. Likewise, in the East, Chinese dynasties, like the Tangs, developed an administrative system the world had never seen before. They didn't just have an emperor, they had thousands of bureaucrats, carefully selected through exams. They had maps, ledgers, laws, and even postal relay stations stretching across the empire. If military empires are predators, then administrative empires are machines powered by paperwork and structure. They don't fear rebellion because who would you rebel against the law? A system you're already a part of? That's the power of this model. When people don't just feel ruled, but feel like they're living within an order. And when built well enough, that system can survive wars and even be reborn under new names and new dynasties. The commercial empire? Not every empire expands with armies. Some empires didn't need to capture cities or plant. Flags, just a ship, a ledger, and an offer you couldn't refuse. This is the commercial empire model where power doesn't come from the sword, but from profit. The Dutch Empire is a classic example. They didn't need vast territory, just a few key islands, a few shipping routes, and the Dutch East India Company, the biggest business on earth at the time. To them, the world wasn't a map to conquer, it was a market to tap into. They built trading posts, not fortresses. They negotiated sugar prices, not ceasefires. Similarly, the tiny city of Venice once held sway over large parts of the Mediterranean. Through trade, these empires didn't need to impose control because others voluntarily became dependent. Salt, spices, silk, gold, these small goods became chains more powerful than shackles. But, like markets, their power was fragile. Cut off a sea route, trigger a price crash. Or let a rival rise and the whole empire can tumble like a falling stock. This model taught the world one thing: sometimes money is mightier than guns. The religious and cultural empire. Not every empire needs to fight, and not every empire needs to trade. There's a stranger kind of empire. It doesn't conquer land with soldiers, nor control markets. It conquers through belief, The religious and cultural empire runs on an invisible but powerful weapon, a value system. No need to force, just make. People believe that your empire stands for what's right or sacred. When a faith spreads, it brings not just belief, but laws, language, and a way of life. The Islamic Empire under the Abbasids is a prime example, from Spain to Central Asia. They spread not just the Quran, but also Arabic, medicine, philosophy, and astronomy. In the West, the Byzantine Empire wasn't just a state hit, it was the guardian of Eastern Orthodox Christianity. Both built influence through conversion, not conquest. They understood, when others believe in your world, you don't need to force them to live in it. They walk in willingly. Empires like this can outlive their governments because their religions and cultures survive on their own, even thousands of years later. Their traces linger in languages, rituals, customs, and even in how people think. The Patchwork and Federation Empire. Not every empire speaks with one voice, one color, or one belief. Some empires are like patchwork quilts stitched together from many mismatched pieces, held by a single thread: central power. This is the model of federations or multi-ethnic empires, where rulers can't and don't need to make every province the same. The Habsburg Empire is a perfect example. A tangled mix of Austria, Hungary, Bohemia, Spain, Italy, with different languages, religions, and laws. Instead of forcing unity, they kept things loose as long as loyalty to the crown remained. Similarly, the Soviet Union in modern times was a new kind of patchwork empire, a union of supposedly independent states, all tightly controlled by a single center, Moscow. They spoke many languages, had many cultures, but were all bound to one ideology: communism. The problem with this model: if the central thread snaps, everything unravels. Without a shared identity or unified vision, the stitched pieces quickly fall apart. When the Habsburg Empire collapsed, it shattered into many independent states. Patchwork empires can be vast, but their very vastness makes them fragile. The global maritime empire. Not all empires need to be connected on a map. Some empires were born, not on land, but across oceans. They didn't aim to conquer entire continents. All they needed were strategic fragments of port. An island, a strait, is the model of the global maritime empire, where power spreads not by borders, but by waves. Portugal and Spain were the pioneers. They crossed oceans, landing in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Not to unify, but to extract. Following them came the British Empire, who turned owning the world into an art form. They didn't need a continuous map, just a network, colonies, naval bases, and trade routes. From India to Canada, from Egypt to Australia, all under one symbol, the Union Jack. At one point, it was said, the sun never sets on the British Empire. But don't think these empires were just about ships and traders. They brought language, law, education, and political ideology. They ruled not only with fortresses, but with textbooks. And the most haunting part is, when the empire ends, what they left behind continues to live on. Today, many nations still speak English, use Anglo-Saxon law, even play cricket despite no longer being colonies. Maritime empires didn't just expand across space, they extended through time. The modern capitalist and tech empire. There's a kind of empire that needs no territory, no forts, and no battleships. It doesn't have maps, it has networks. No need for flags, just logos. This is the model of the modern capitalist and tech empire. An empire that conquers not with swords, but with data, global standards, and economic dependence. In the past, empires fought over land. Today, they fight over your screen and your attention. Take modern-day America. Without colonizing, without stationing troops everywhere, they are still a superpower. Because they control the world's reserve currency. They set the rules of the global economy, and they export pop culture across the planet. A single Hollywood movie can influence millions more than a political speech. And then there are empires that aren't even countries, they're companies. Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft. These invisible empires don't need armies because they have something stronger: algorithms. You're not their citizen, but you use their products every day. You don't live on their territory, but your behavior is tracked, analyzed, and influenced by them. This is an empire with no borders, no map set, it's everywhere. And the scariest part, we don't call it an empire. We call it convenience, the trend, normal. The ideological and value-based empire. There is one final kind of empire it doesn't conquer, doesn't trade, doesn't rely on tech or armies. It only needs one thing, to make you believe that its way of life is the right one. At that point, no invasion is necessary. You'll willingly step into its orbit. This is the ideological empire. Power lies in defining what is good, what is bad, what is modern, and what is outdated. Take Enlightenment era France, for example. They didn't need to expand their borders to influence Europe, just philosophy, books, and the idea of human rights. Thinkers like Rousseau, Voltaire, and Montesquieu planted the seeds of revolution, not just in France, but around the world. Ideas strong enough to transcend borders and time. Then, in the 20th century, the U.S. became the epicenter of a new ideological model: freedom, democracy, and the American dream. Not everyone likes America, but many want to live like Americans dress, like them, study like them, and dream like them. During the Cold War, the U.S. and the Soviet Union didn't just fight with weapons, they fought with worldviews. One side pushed freedom and consumerism, the other, equality and collectivism. The final victory didn't come from missiles but from which dream the world chose to believe in. Ideological empires leave no territory, but they leave behind value systems, and those can last longer than any nation ever could.